Anybody be here with me? Or you guys?
Yep, we're gonna all be here.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Megan.
Hello, Miss Erica.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
We're well.
Great.
How are
Hey,
you?
good. Thanks for joining us.
We see we
Yep,
got
I
Kelly.
was sorry to have missed the last one.
Yeah, me too.
Well, we've been finding that a lot of people are missing them, but then they're watching the videos after. And so we might have a small crew tonight, but just to go ahead so that we can allow for Gladys to have enough time, I just want to share a quick little story about introducing Gladys. And I've told a version of this before, but Gladys was one of my coaches my first year of teaching middle school math. And I went to go to a session. It was one of my very first expeditionary learning sessions. And they had set up this golf course in a library somewhere. And I say a golf course, but it was a mathematical golf course. And you had to pick out the angles of your shot. And I don't know if you remember that, Gladys, but that was one of our first.
Do. I can't believe you remember that.
It was one of our first. Yeah, well, I know it's been a little while since that time, but I remember this, and I remember talking about the golf course and thinking about the angles. And then we finished the exercise and we'd had a lot of fun, but it wasn't really until Gladys debriefed that experience. And I remember thinking about her voice and what kind of came through from that. And I remember her thinking about, can you imagine teaching this lesson the way that it's taught 99% of the time? And just think about the difference between that and the way that we did it today. And I want you to think about how your kids would feel, how they would think, and the difference in their hearts and their minds. And then she kind of got out of the way, and I thought, oh man, I got a lot of work to do to teach middle school mathematics and to learn from this wonderful human being before us. So with that introduction, Gladys Graham, take it over.
Thank you, Scott. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is well. I'm doing pretty good. It was a hard day in Baltimore County Public Schools for me. I am currently a 5th grade math and content teacher in a school that is experiencing more than a 20% increase in children of color than they have in the past. This increase has been gradual, but this year, just a huge jump. And so trying to continue my work around social justice and identity is more important than ever. So I'm really glad to be here with you all tonight. So I thought that I'm just going to kind of keep rolling through my slides, and we can take questions along the way, and then we can also take a set of questions at the end. So if you have questions, we can just raise your hand. Is that a feature in Zoom? There is a feature in Zoom on that, correct?
Yes, I'm not really good at it, but Tanner and I will keep our eyes out for it.
Okay. Or you all can make ask questions within the chat box, and Megan and Tanner, you guys are going to help me out, right? And let me know when things come up. So the work that I've been focusing on the last couple of years is really trying to develop a positive mathematical identity within my classroom. And so what I'm hoping to do tonight is to kind of begin by talking about, what put me on this journey, and how I got started, and have been working to kind of figure out how to sustain this work over time. And then how do we come to understand what math identity is, and what are some activities around that to get us started, and how that around just identity And then math identity led us to a deeper understanding of the characteristics of mathematics, characteristics of mathematicians, excuse me, and how we kind of put some flesh on that as a class, and then how we use some tracking tools to hold ourselves accountable to these behaviors that are associated with these characteristics that we identify as a class. So throughout this presentation, I'm also going to be kind of sharing a little bit of the resources and tools that that I have been using for the last few years as well. So what really put me on this path is that I'm sure, like many of you, I have had just a number of students who say, I'm not a mathematician, or I don't do math, or I'm not good at math, before they even get to the classroom, to a math classroom. And it's really troublesome, because I am a true believer in what Joe Bowler is saying about a growth mindset, is that you can't have a growth mindset if you're already telling yourself that you're not good at something. And so I couldn't really do the work of helping them, or I couldn't really do the work of helping them develop a growth mindset if I wasn't doing the work of helping them deal with how they saw themselves as mathematicians. And so that led me, and I didn't do this work alone. I have a wonderful partner who teaches another 5th grade class to kind of be able to talk with and to try things with and to hear feedback from. So that's been just a valuable valuable contribution to my personal growth. So again, this whole mindset piece, it was clear to us as we were starting this work that what we were reading and hearing about, what mathematicians do, sounded very similar to what we had been reading and heard about what scientists do. And so we really wanted to kind of bring life to some of those characteristics. And so that kind of set us on this path. And finally, the idea of building agency. We wanted our classroom to really provide more opportunities for equity of voice, for equity of opportunity for the students that we were serving or are serving. And we wanted our students to kind of take some ownership of that. And so we felt like the work we were heading into had to make sure that we kept checking in on our own biases and our own thinking, so that we weren't sort of pushing our ideas, but really kind of providing resources and having kids reflect and come to their own understandings around some of these concepts of who is a mathematician and what is mathematics. And so even if you go into my class today, like last year and the year before, those are 2 anchoring questions. 1, what is mathematics? And 2, what do mathematicians do? Now, I want to be clear that I was very intentional about pushing on this idea about, what do mathematicians do and what is mathematics? Because I feel like that from my own experience, I've been immersed in more of a white male definition of what that is and what that profession looks like and what it can offer and blah, 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 blah. And I wanted to just flip the script, because what I had started to read was beginning to flip the script for me. So learning math in context and thinking about how culture and mathematics come together and marry for understanding made me think differently about what I knew about mathematics. So where were we hoping to go? We were hoping that students would learn to see themselves as capable or incapable of succeeding, or that should be capable or incapable of succeeding, and to internalize what it means to do mathematics based on the tasks that were assigned. We were hoping that they would not have that fear and that anxiety going into the gate to accomplish a task that we would give them. We were also hoping that thinking about how will our students come to know and appreciate and internalize these characteristics. So how could they see themselves and how we were understanding some of the behaviors mathematicians engaged in? And could they really connect culturally with these characteristics, as we would read about a variety of mathematicians and learn about the work that they do. And we also asked ourselves, so how do we kind of build this positive self-belief and efficacy about mathematics and helping students build sort of a growing mindset, a growth mindset? Any questions around just kind of how we got started and where we were hoping to go with this? Okay, we'll just keep going. So we started this project with an art teacher, and we chose to work with an art teacher instead of starting it directly in mathematics, because we knew right away that our kids had some issues with anxiety and issues with thinking that they didn't like mathematics. And so we wanted to kind of backdoor it and have them deal with identity in a place we know that they love. Every fifth grader I know loves art class and what particularly our art teacher brings for them to do. So she gave them an assignment. She asked them to explore who they are as humans and understanding what is important to them and what matters about their opinions, and building community sort of around this discussion around identity. Now, I'll get into this a little bit more, but she really wanted them to kind of just begin to think about how, what were the elements of identity that they most identified with. And so, of course, kids started talking about things like where they lived, the clothes they wear, the community that they lived in. And so this child, now mind you, this was during the time of COVID. And so all of these work samples are digital work samples and assignments that they had to do online. So she had them take a slide and she had them fill the slide with some images that they felt really captured who they are, what their community was about. As you can see, this is a child who was really connected to her roots in West Virginia. And so she captured these images of West Virginia and the sunrise and the community and the flag and that sort of thing. These are a few other examples, and then as you can see, they're kind of all over the place, and that was okay. Some of them talked about their favorite things that they love, their family, their birthdays. And I do want to say, no, these are fifth graders. These are fifth graders, not 6th, 7th, or 8th graders. And so their choice of what they wanted to focus on seems very surfacey. And it is. It's very surfacey. But that's where we wanted them to start. That's what we wanted them to just be able to share their point of view at the time of what they would consider are elements of their identity. We didn't get into thinking about some of the deeper cultural elements of identity until we start getting back into the math classroom. So I wanted to present you with this kind of iceberg image, because I feel like this is a perfect image of thinking around cultural identity, because we have our surface culture, which is the food we eat, the flags, the festivals, the clothes we wear, all of those, the literature that we read in our with our cultural selves and our cultural communities, the types of music that we like to. It's not until we start getting into the deeper water, so to speak, that we start to think about things like beliefs, values, how we choose to spend our time. What do we see as our future? How do we define ourselves as a person or self? And this is more in line of kind of the iceberg that I had actually used with kids that had a little bit more simplified language that we would take pieces of and then tear apart or deconstruct to try to make sense of the difference between sort of the surface understanding of culture and identity versus a more deeper understanding of culture and identity. And this really led to some deep discussions. So we did a lot of this both inside math classroom and outside of math classroom, because we really kind of wanted them to see that this, even though we were talking about identity, they were going to have some work around identity in the math classroom, but this is just work that they needed to do as young human beings and people who are in the process or on the journey of growing to know who they are and who they think they might want to be and have some power to get there. So this is just some listing of some of the activities that we did in class. We did some things around interest and versus experts, and they had to create slides and cards that created, what are your 3 interests, but what are maybe 3 things that you feel like you're an expert at? And they became sort of trading cards and a way for kids to be kind of communicating with each other. I did the same thing in thinking about mathematics and asked them, what are 3 concepts in math that you're interested in, but give me at least 2 that you think you're an expert in. What do you think? And then they had to not only give an example of that, but try to create a visual that represented that for them to talk to and have conversations. This is one of my favorite ones, was Where I Stand, which is a community building activity. Is where students bring in an object that means something really strong to them. And then I use an object that I can place in the center of the room. And then I began to ask them questions, and they can choose how close to that center object they want their object to be. And the answer, or where they place that object, really is kind of like the answer to the questions. So for example, and there's also a way for just to get them to know each other. So for example, if I ask them something around bullying or discrimination, how many of you feel like you've been discriminated against? They could put their object close to the center object, or they could keep their object close to themselves if they felt like, no, that's something I'm familiar. We wouldn't necessarily have to have further discrimination, further discussion about it, but it did give us a chance to place the object and then just observe and see how many objects were closer to the center, how many objects were further away from the center object. And so I would ask questions like, how many of you feel that you're really good at mathematics? How many of you feel like you practice a lot outside of class in mathematics, or use mathematics when you go to the store? And just getting them to look around and see who is saying yes and who is saying no was a way to, in a non-threatening way, open up who we are as a math community. And this final one here, this is some post-it stories, and this is kind of moving us into a deeper study of those characteristics, is asking the question, so what does a mathematician look like? And so what I got from my kids is that their experience is they see mathematicians as males. They saw mathematicians mostly as Caucasian people. So they didn't see really themselves as young people of color, as mathematicians. And that was concerning. So that was information for me and an entry into some discussion about that. But also a good way of seeing where a starting point is, well, why is that? Why is it that they don't see themselves as mathematician, or see someone in their community as mathematicians too, as a mentor or a model? So on the side here is a book that I picked up this year. I got this from my principal, and it is full of just wonderful experiences for kids around identity. And so I just wanted to take a moment and share a little bit of this book. We've done this identity web, so that we can consider many factors of how that shape us as human beings. This peer-to-peer interview, we've used that whole, what am I expert as versus what am I interested as a way of interviewing each other to get to know each other. Sometimes we do peer-to-peer interviews when we are having a discussion around a problem situation and there's multiple solutions. And so it's a way of getting them to talk about their solution and hearing somebody else's solution. It's also a way for them to think about, what does it mean to be an active listener? And so it's a way for us to practice those skills. And we also do what is called understanding explicit bias. I added this to the mix this year because, again, this is a year where I felt like my kids needed to think about the language that they're using with each other and the language that they're using in the math classroom and the language that they have heard unconsciously about who they are as mathematicians and what their capabilities are. I wanted them to be empowered to be able to make changes to all of those things. So this was there's a set of activities in this book around understanding biases and microaggressions. So helping them understand what those things are and then helping them really confront those and deal with those in their lives. And finally, there's a great set of activities around helping kids kind of find the humanity in themselves and others. And this was the set of activities I feel really do a lot to build self-accountability. So, helping kids think about, yes, I am empowered. I can make decisions for myself that set me on a path to be what I want to be and not necessarily what I hear people tell me who I am. So another activity that I did with kids was this math autobiography, and I did this pretty early on. And this is just a way for them to begin to think about how math is interacting within their lives. So asking the question, how can you share about yourself through mathematics? Where does math present itself even through some way throughout your life? So let me see if I can pull up. Nope, that's not what I want to do. Well, I'll come back to that. There are I've got a one-page write-up that I'll be willing to kind of share, put in the Dropbox or something for you if you're interested, that kind of gives a descriptor of how to create that. And here's a model of what that could look like. So here is a person who, lives. Want to walk between 3 and 5 miles each afternoon. Complete the table with 3 different route combinations that would suggest that you would suggest and their total distance. And so again, this is a real neighborhood in Baltimore City. This is really where she lives, and she's giving a math task. Here's a couple of other examples. A couple of kids used maps, but other kids chose to kind of use their homes to think about, my favorite part and shape of my house. And so this gave this child some way of kind of talking about where they live, but thinking about how math is connected to where they live. So then we began to move more into sort of the characteristics of mathematician. Mid-school math has had Tracy Zager as a speaker at one of their conferences, and that's where I had an opportunity to meet her and to be introduced to the work that she's doing. And so she really does a lot of work around this question of, what do mathematicians do? Some of the big ideas in her writing is to think about how do we build this sort of mathematical habits of thinking within our students? How do we get them to think about what mathematicians do and how they do it? And so I decided to do it through the use of some picture books because they were easily accessed, lots of color, and we could keep going back to them. And so I just want to give you a sense of what's in Tracy's book. This is her table of contents, and you can see here she's talking about mathematicians take risks, mathematicians make mistakes, they're precise, they rise to a challenge. And within each of these chapters, there are examples of mathematical tasks that you could add to your curriculum that would help build some of these characteristics. So you could take the existing mid-school math curriculum and think about, well, how does this task help me meet or address any of these characteristics of mathematicians? And these are some of the books that we read. And I was really surprised. My fifth graders loved the read alouds of these books. We read about and studied some scientists and what were the scientists like versus the mathematicians. How are they alike and how are they different? We read about what are some of the jobs that these mathematicians have. And of course, you'll notice that many of the books that I chose were children of color because I wanted them to see themselves in these roles as mathematicians. I wanted them to see that there were people like them who are out there doing this work. I also wanted them to see that you learn math, but you can do a whole lot of different things. I was able, through a connection I have through a woman who operates a nonprofit, it's called Black Girl Mathic. Black Girl Mathic.
Magic.
Math, yeah, I can't say that word. Say
Yeah,
it again.
like magic,
Black
but
Girl
magic.
Magic.
Yeah.
And what she does is that she has a whole connection of people who were math majors from her university. And she connected me with a woman who was a dancer, who was a mathematician and who majored in mathematics. And so she was able to Zoom with us and dance and connect mathematics to the arts. And so I'm trying to break down some of the barriers that we have about what math is all about and where we get to see math, so that hopefully students are beginning to see that they live math like they live literacy, that math is just another tool in which we communicate and understand the world around them. And so as a class, we came up with these lists of characteristics that we wanted to hold on to in our classroom and that we wanted to learn more about and see if we could embody the life of a mathematician in our own work by highlighting these particular characteristics in our classroom. Could we be true problem solvers? Could we be a dreamer and really take risks? Could we imagine new ways of thinking about mathematics? Could we be curious? Could we constantly ask questions? Could we really make space to make mistakes and to persevere through them? Could we connect our ideas across different content areas? Could we appreciate precision and work to be precise? Could we express our math ideas in a way that's respectful and be appreciated for those ideas? And so while those are great things to inspire to and to want to be, we had to figure out as a class, how are we going to make this stuff real? And so we started by thinking about that question around what do mathematicians do? And again, I went back to the experience that they started the year with and had them go out and find images of thinking around how do these images really represent what mathematicians do? And so then we started creating sort of this classroom action. All right, if I want to be, let's say, a problem solver, what does that mean? What do I have to do in order for that to work for me? And we came up a list of statements that said, okay, if we're gonna have problem solvers in this room, then we are not focused on just the right, but on finding a solution, not just the right solution, but we were going to really explore all possible solutions and talk about which one is maybe more efficient, or which one led us to some faulty reasoning, or which one seemed to really get us there and get us there quickly. Not to say one is valued over the other, but just for the sake of hearing each other's thinking and reasoning and learning how to follow. We were going to make sure that we had fun thinking about a problem and then connecting problems to other problems. And I'm not going to read all of these to you, but you kind of get the sense that this was their language, that this was how they wanted to think about these characteristics. And they were saying, okay, this is what we're going to do, but this is also what you need to do, Miss Graham, as our facilitator in this class. And so again, we're doing this work because we want to hold each other accountable for it, because we value it. And the only way we can value it is to show that we hold each other accountable for it. And I had to be willing for them to say, I think that you're really not honoring the characteristic of curiosity if you're not giving us enough time to really do some deep thinking. Because yes, the reality, I've got a curriculum, I've got sequence to match. And so I had to balance my needs as, Baltimore County Public School teacher doing their curriculum with valuing this work that we were on as a class. And that was my job, was to make space for this to happen for them. And so creating this chart evolved over the full year. We might have started with 2 characteristics and deconstructed those characteristics and everything we were doing to figure out the language that we wanted to add to our chart before we take on a new characteristics. Or we might read another children's book and find a characteristics that we wanted to hold tight to. Continuing list of the characteristics that we dealt with.
Miss Gladys, are you gonna share these with everybody? Is this a
Yep.
sacred PowerPoint by chance?
No, this is no sake, and it's an evolving PowerPoint. I have the art teacher has a new project this year that she started with. She's not finished, so she wasn't in a place where she felt like she could share her work. But I'll tell you about it. It's most interesting is that she has taken the kids into a deep study of an Arabian artist who uses clothing design to express identity. Mm-hmm. And so she's having them right now think about what that means. And so later in October, what I'm going to be doing is that we're going to use that to continue our study of surface area. And so, for example, I've got 3 students who are thinking about designing skirts through use of triangles. And so she's telling me, okay, but you've got to figure out the surface area of every triangle that you put together up, one way, this way, to create the skirt, and how much of the surface area has to be covered with black, how much surface area has to be covered with maybe, a symbol that represents their identity. She has another young guy who's in the midst of making this, like he wants to make a vest. And so he's making the vest out of a square for the back, and then the 2 front panels are 2 rectangles. And again, he's got to answer the question and figure out how can he determine the surface area of the pieces of the vest, and then how can he make sure that he is meeting the requirements of so much surface area being covered by, her list of criteria that she has. And so this interplay of being in the arts classroom and bringing it back to the math classroom and back to the art classroom to take the design a little further, bringing it back to check the math has been really exciting, and we're just starting that process. So again, we're trying to keep pushing the boundaries of where we play with mathematics within our day.
Great, awesome.
And so later in the year, last year, we started working with this idea about the learning pit. You might have read about the learning pit. I know that Jo Boaler talks about the learning pit a lot in her materials. I know a lot of schools implement this idea about the learning pit. The learning pit became a way for us to track and reflect on our growth over time. So as we were taking on as characteristics that we really wanted to get really good at in the classroom, we needed a way for us to think about, well, how are we holding each other account? How are we measuring improvement over time? And so the idea of this learning pit is that you're up here at the top of the pit where the learning starts. And then as learning happens, it gets really difficult and challenging down here. And then you have to figure out, what are the tools I need that's going to help pull me out of the pit to success? But sometimes learning is just not that smooth. Sometimes learning will take you back into the pit when you've learned something new, and you've got to play around here for a little bit before you can figure out how to get back up to the top of the pit again. And so I just kind of captured some statements by some of my fifth graders around what they were experiencing around interacting with the learning pit. This became such a great tool because they would say to me things like, "I'm deep in the pit, Miss Graham. I'm deep in the pit." And I'd ask them, "So what do you need? What do you think you need as a learner to help you succeed with this or that?" And so one way to think about this is that, because sometimes you just don't know, is that we started creating these graphics to help us think about our experience along the journey of the pit. And then students start thinking about, well, what are the strategies that we can use to help us get out of the pit? So if I'm learning 2-digit by 2-digit multiplication, I'm falling down in the pit when I don't know my multiplication facts. I can practice the facts, but memory alone may not get me there when I need to be there. And so I might have to use some of these other strategies that we're talking about to help climb out of my pit. So this is just an example of how we would use the pit. Sometimes the strategy that I taught in class didn't get them out of the pit, or didn't give them enough that they could be efficient with multiplication, and they might have to try a new strategy. But the point is that I wanted them to think about this as learners, not me just give them a grade back of, oh, you did well or you didn't do well. They had to take ownership of this to say, I don't understand this, or I understand this, and I need to reflect on what I need to do to move myself forward. And again, it goes back to building that mathematical that identity, building confidence that they could take control of this, that they could take ownership of these characteristics of their learning, to have a growth mindset and to embrace those characteristics. So we're not through. I'm not through. I'm still learning more. I'm still trying to make sense out of what students need to help them and do better as young mathematicians. But I'm constantly thinking about the messages that I am sending by doing this work. And I hope that what I'm saying to them is that this is a partnership between me and the students to help them be the best mathematician that they can be, and embrace that math is a valuable tool for them to learn and to hold on to, just like every other tool that we're teaching them in school. And that they have the ability to define their own mathematical identity. They don't have to be stuck in an identity that says, oh, well, my parents aren't good at math, so I'm not good at math. No, you have options there. And I want to put that in their hand so that they feel like they can make a decision and know what to do to improve their math identities over time. So that's all that she wrote, ma'am. Any questions that you might have? I'm noticing the chat box seems to be, has a couple of things in there. Megan, is there something any questions that anybody's coming up with?
Besides, do they get your slides? Because I think we like them a lot.
You get the slides, and I'm going to include a couple of other tasks that really push the edges for kids to embrace some of these characteristics. Another activity that we did called Mathabetians, and we create this fictitious scenario where kids are put back into early existence, and they have to create their own system of numbers in order to calculate all this stuff. But they can't use base 10. They have to use like A, B, C, and D. And so they have to figure out how can they represent numbers if you only have A, B, C, and D. So I have that all written up for you, and I'll make sure we pass that along as well.
Gladys, I have a question. When first of all, it's like when you're at the barbecue and you're like, man, it's like, man, this chicken is good. Gladys Graham, that's just awesome, right? You're just amazing. Like I think your voice, I think what you're doing is just remarkable. I think sometimes like to me, Gladys, I still wonder when the book is going to come out. I really do. Yeah, I know you're kind of busy. I know you got things that you got to do. You got your projects, you got all kinds of stuff. But I feel like this is probably of all the work that I've seen, it matches the level of work that Joe's doing. It matches the level of work that Dan's doing. It matches that level of work. And I think that I'd invite you to think about the next level of this for your work, because I do think that the level of depth that you're getting to isn't gotten to.
Well, we're not making
really
space for it. I as a teacher in the math room every day, it is a constant battle to hold ground, to deal with the mental state of my children in relationship to mathematics.
Yeah.
And until we find space to deal with their perception of themselves as mathematician and their emotions that they experience when they are in that math moment, they're not going to excel like we want them to. Because Joe says it best, she's giving us the brain research on it. We know what happens to the brain when we are in fear or in anxiety or, what have you, or when we feel like we have a fixed mindset around something. So it's not enough for us to say, have a growth mindset. We've got to do all of the work to help our students figure out how to change that for themselves, as I'm trying to do my work to help me change it for myself.
I still find it remarkable, and I want to make sure I pause and leave room for other folks. I still find it remarkable that so much of what we think of as teaching is of the concept of getting that information to the kids, and that it's about the content as opposed to our beliefs and our systems of beliefs about how we can access that content, the things that we can do, what's possible for us. Because when we believe that it's possible, we're going to get there. Ultimately, we're going to ultimately do that. So anyway, I'm going to pause and let other
for
folks
me,
know.
this is the question around equity, because for me, it's around access.
Yeah.
And for me, this is around helping kids find more windows into mathematics.
Gladys, Erica and I had kind of the same question, each other. And she was asking, what are some of the most notable changes you've seen in your students because of the work that you've been doing?
Oh, so Erica, this summer I had a student, I can't say I had because I have her this year as well. And you have that student that, you know, she's popular, but when it comes to asking her a math question in front of the class, she literally physically, emotionally shrinks within herself. And she immediately is like, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. I mean, the level of anxiety that I would see on her was really concerning. And that to the point where I went with the counselor to say, I think we need to provide her with some additional supports here. And it has been kind of stopping and recognizing that behavior right on it. And so we have this protocol that when people say things like, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I don't get this, we say, stop. It's 1, 2, 3, stop. And they are required to name at least 2 things that they do well. And if they can't think of it at the moment, then the class can chime in and give them 2. It could be, Christopher, I noticed that you were really encouraging to so-and-so when we had group work today, or, something else, so that it becomes the energy becomes the responsibility of the community to lift everybody up, not just the person who needs lifting. It's not just their responsibility, it's all of our responsibility. And so to see her now, and we had an assessment, like a checkpoint, and she got a perfect score. She got a perfect score. And it put tears in my eyes. It put tears in her eyes because she kept saying, is this right? Is this right? And so it's those moments that I say, okay, yep, I got in trouble last week for not being on the sequence or the, whatever that I need to be on. Yeah, I'm 2 weeks behind. I am. But I got that. I got this little girl who is performing in my class and who is speaking up now. I got that. And it is I guess maybe I'm at the age now, and thank goodness I have tenure now, that I can't worry about so much of being this and that, when I know that my students need much more than that, than what that curriculum is saying. You need to be here, you need to do this. I got that. I'm a professional. I know that. But I can't let that be the driving force in the classroom. I've got to let my students be the driving force in the classroom that tells me where I need to go. Now that's a professional choice that I make, and I'll own that. But I feel like that this work has shown me that so many of our kids need us to pay attention to their souls. We need to pay attention to how they see themselves as learners. And until we do that, this is not that social emotional learning. It's part of that. But this seems to me to be even deeper than that. They've got to understand how their brain is operating as learners and feel empowered that they can change the path, whatever path they're on, or they can, accelerate the path they're on. If that's the path they want to be on, they have it within themselves to do that work. And so that's what I'm hoping that I give, and that because I know I get that from my kids, and that's what I hope I give back to them.
Wow, well, that sounds amazing. And I love teaching 4th grade math, but there were always those children who just resisted, hid, were passive aggressive, were openly aggressive about learning.
Yep.
And, you know, and I felt like I could take a certain number so far, but, you know, I never got everybody. And what you're doing is casting the net so wide and empowering them. It just sounds great.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you. Y'all need to
Gladys.
come on to Baltimore and come visit.
Gladys, we had another question, and I don't know if you had a specific source. Someone was asking where they can get the books. I don't know if are they randomly easily found on Amazon or Barnes
They
and Noble?
are. So if we go back here in this PowerPoint, what I try to do is that, like, all of these are books you can find on Amazon. Okay. And so what I would do, I think we started with Ada Twist because I just love me some Ada Twist. She is, and you know, this little African-American girl who's growing to be a scientist, and how her family is trying to deal with it. And so we got lots of language with that. And then we scooted over here to Einstein. And oh no, we read this one, The Beam of Light. You know, and then we just started jumping around. This is one of the, we read this in science because he was the inventor of the water soaker.
Oh.
I hope I'm not dating myself, but the kids knew the water soaker. So they were excited to learn about him. And there's lots of YouTube videos of actually with him speaking about his invention and the math that he used and blah, you know, his whole life. You know, he was very unsuccessful doing a couple of things, and this kind of set him off to being a great inventor. And of course, you know, thinking about these folks here, our computer scientists. Now the movie is escaping my head.
Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures, thank you. So all of these, and then here, this is the book that Becoming the Math Teacher You Wish You Had. This is just, it's almost too dense, to be honest with you. You just got to be willing to take your time and go in and get what you need. It's not it's not the type of book you read from front to back. It's the type of book you read and you read pieces of it. It's got lots of visual ideas, lots of experiences to give kids, both digital experiences and in-person experiences that you can use that then build these types of characteristics. How do you begin to talk to kids about taking risk? How do you set that up and keep it going? What is the language that you can use? What are experiences that you give them, and how you pull out the idea of taking risk? And so Tracy was really helpful to kind of put some seeds of thoughts in my mind around how I could get at some of these characteristics. And then, you know, once again, once the kids started being able to name these are the characteristics that they got from reading these books. And that was amazing to me.
Yeah.
And then when we started talking about, okay, so what does it mean? What does it look like, feel like, sound like type of stuff? I know that sounds very primary, but I did start with what does it look like and feel like. That helped us get to some of this very specific language about what we needed to do in class. And then I had to give them permission to call me out when I was violating some of the things we said we wanted to do. And that was okay, because at least it told me they're paying attention.
Yeah.
They wanted to.
This is all kind of made me think, and I put it on early in the chat, but it's starting, like, it brings up this whole, you know, in order to be in a relationship, like, you kind of got to love yourself before you can love somebody else kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I started thinking about, you know, we say, oh, go and collaborate, have your students collaborate. And one, teaching them how to do that, it's hard. And we don't even know a lot of, you know, tasks that help kids learn. But before you even jump into that, I just feel like this is so integral, just as a personal thing for students to start thinking about how they learn and where they think they are and how to talk about themselves. And then they can get into, you know, working with other people using those tools. And I think it's awesome.
So Erica, I know you can probably speak to this. I mean, in 4th and 5th grade, I have sentence starters that helps us have dialogue with each other. So when we say connecting ideas, I had to teach them how to connect ideas. You know, it didn't just say, okay, we're going to connect ideas. No, I had to go and find structures that I could teach that gave them ways to practice it. And then we would have, you know, some math experience, and then I would embed that structure within that math experience.
Yeah, giving
And
them
eventually it became, you know, okay, so this is what you need to do. When you move to small group, you're going to use a blah, 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 blah tool to do this or that. And yes, it took almost till, I would say, April, May, June. I only got 3 more months to go before they really had a sense of independence and flow with it. But what I'm hoping is that it wasn't about what they got, no matter how long it took them to get, they have for the rest of their lives. And so I have students who come back to their elementary school to pick up their brothers and sisters who talk to me about their math and what they're enjoying, what they miss that we used to do, and that sort of thing. I have students who are saying that they like mathematics. That is the goal for me. Because I was one of those students who, I didn't love math. I mean, I had a secret love of it, but I never felt like I was confident enough to really do math and be good enough at math to claim that I was a mathematician in any way.
Well, this was just awesome, Gladys.
Yeah, Gladys.
Well, thank you for having me. And thank you for this opportunity to share. You know, as a member of the mid-school math family, you know, anyone, if you need something or you want me to hear something that you're doing, and just have a critical, you know, friend or ear, or share some more ideas, you got my email address now.
I just want to say thanks, Gladys Graham. I'm blown away. I really am. I'm just always blown away by what you bring to everything that we do, Gladys. And for me, at least, there's a part of everything that you say that, yes, it attaches to my kids and the teaching and the work that we're doing with them. But at another level, it connects to me as like my own human being. Like, ooh, am I okay? I'm going to take a risk, but I'm going to persevere. Okay, that's at the very deep level, heart level of everything that we do. It doesn't just connect at the level of the kids. It connects at the level of like, well, geez, that's what we have to do as a company, but that's also what I have to do as a person. That's what I have to do each and every day when I wake up in the morning and like, oh, okay. And so there's just this time, like sometimes when you wake up in the morning, you go, what do I need to hear? I need to hear a little bit of voice of Gladys Graham, like to be able to fill my heart, to be able to move on. And I do think that you're inspiring to us in a way that is really remarkable. And we're so appreciative. We really are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I so appreciate this opportunity just even to speak about the work, because, you know, it reminds me of how much more work I still need to do. And it also gets other folks to hear and to give me feedback, and for me to be thinking around how do we improve this? How do we go deeper? How do we, you know, hit the nuances that we're missing by doing this or that? So as you move forward, and if you try something, I hope that, you know, you let it be part of the mid-school math family as well, because you're part of the family. And so when you have ideas and you find something that's working really well, I'm really hoping that I can be able to tap into your resources as well.
Thanks, Gladys.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
All
We'll
right.
see you
Take
at the
care.
next one.
And thanks everyone for coming and listening. I appreciate that.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.